Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video, and in today's video I'm going to be predicting the Inoue versus Nery fight. And so if you're new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like video if you do indeed like video, and let's get straight into it. So going into this fight, Inoue is 26-0 with 23 KOs. And Nery is 35-1 with 27 KOs. This fight's for the IBF, WBA Super, WBC, and the WBO World Super Bantamweight titles. Inoue's last fight was a win via KO in round 10 versus Tapayes, and Nery's last fight was a win via TKO in round 2 versus Salvador. Nery is a southpaw. Nery's loss came via KO in round 7 versus Figueroa in 2021. And to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying, obviously, this for all the titles in which Inoue currently holds. He's given Nery the opportunity as a challenger. He is sticking around at the super bantamweight for the moment, and it seems as though he wants to have this fight and then possibly one, possibly two more fights until he wants to, inevitably, if things keep going, of course, the way that he's wanting, to then move up into the featherweight division. And I think at the moment, when you look at the fighters around the super bantamweight division, it's an interesting division. It's not crazily stacked or anything like that, but I think this Nery fight is an entertaining fight. I think it will definitely be that, and I think it's a matchup in which is something a little bit different to what we've seen Inoue against as of recent, more than anything. And I think, when you look at other options for him around the super bantamweight division, there was talks of that of Casemiro and Akhmadaliev, and I think they're two very good fights, but I do believe that the Nery fight offers something, like I mentioned, a little bit different, which I'm going to talk about in this. Of course, they're both coming off stoppage victories. Inoue's one versus Tapayes was one which was another very good showing from Inoue. It was a breaking down of Tapayes and really showing levels of class again. And Tapayes was very tough. I think he was not given necessarily enough credit in the build-up to the fight about how tough he actually was, but he was very tough, very game, did seemingly catch Inoue with shots a little bit at times, but Inoue did what he had to do and really showed that level of class and really improved throughout the fight and just was the faster, quicker, cleaner, better reactions, all them type of attributes to help him to win convincingly against Tapayes. Nery's last fight, it was against somebody in Salvador who wasn't any level really near him. It was an easy stoppage for him, really. I mean, even when he was letting his hands go to get the stoppage, it seemed like he wasn't even landing with half the shots. I think it was just the physical pressure, which was just too much for Salvador. And from what it seemed, Salvador just didn't really want to be in there. He didn't really come in with the mindset of, I'm going to come here to win. He just seemed to give up the first opportunity. And, credit to Nery, he did what he had to do. He won, and that was all that matters at the end of the day. And of course, he still managed to get the stoppage in the first place. Of course, Nery Southpaw offers something a little bit different, but Inoue switch stancer himself, he's able to counteract, I'm sure, anything like that. Obviously, Nery, he's had the loss versus Figueroa back in 2021. I mean, Nery's been around for a while in the super bantamweight division and in the lower weight divisions, and he's fought a lot of top guys, and so, this is somebody who's got a lot of experience going into it and is somebody who, like I mentioned, fought against top guys, knows how to win in tough fights and knows how to win away from home. Inoue obviously fighting in his home country yet again of Japan, and Nery has fought and gotten some big wins in the past in Japan, and so he's very much used to that, and that's something which is not going to, make him shy away. Obviously, he's been banned for a little bit from fighting in Japan because I believe he missed weight or something a little while ago, and also tested positive for some kind of substance, and so he was banned for a while, but he's back now, and it's good to see him being allowed back for this fight because, like I mentioned, this is a fight in which, in my opinion, is going to make for an entertaining one. And when you last saw Nery on the big stage, it was in the Hovhannissian fight, and that was a fight which was a very entertaining fight, and we kind of knew that that would be the case. And Nery, as always, showed a lot of heart and a lot of desire to get the win, and he did. And that was a world level fight in which he did show that he was still at that high level. And, to speak about other fights on the card, you speak about Inoue's brother, Inoue versus Ishida, a good fight, I think. Obviously Inoue defending the WBA World Bantamweight title, in which he won in, I believe he won in his last fight. I might have not, if not, it was the fight before. I think Inoue's going to win by a TKO in round 4. I don't think this version of Inoue well, not this version, this Inoue is near the level of Inoue, but you can't really compare the two too much. I don't really like to, compare brothers too much, but I believe he's still got that will, that desire. I think he's willing to be a warrior, and possibly has more of a warrior heart and a bit more of a different type of style in which he is willing to stand and trade and does have good body shots. Perhaps sometimes it's not always the best way he is standing and trading, and he can do his better work behind the jab or anything like that. But he's got that confident style in him, and he believes in himself. And I think somebody like a Nishida is somebody who has also fought at a top level consistently and has always lost when he's gotten to that world level, but he's never been stopped. And I think if Inoue can go and get the stoppage, in which I think he can, Ishida's on a half decent run of form. He's coming off a stoppage win himself. That could create a statement, and it is definitely the toughest test in which Inoue has fought so far. So I think, like I mentioned, TKO win round 4. Speak about the other two world title fights on this card. It's a great card. I believe any kind of Japanese boxing card with Inoue on deserves to have a great undercard, and yet again this does, and it's really shining a light on the lower weight divisions, which is something which I've just really been wanting to see, and it's really nice to see. And to speak about Maloney versus Takai for the, of course, WBO World Bantamweight title, I think Maloney will win via unanimous decision. I think Maloney sometimes gets a little bit of discredit and is, in my opinion, a bit of an underrated champion. Obviously, in his last fight, it was a very grueling fight, and he had to show a lot of heart and a lot of will to be able to get through that. And perhaps the scorecards were a little bit generous in his favour, but nonetheless, it was still a fight in which he did, like I mentioned, show a lot of heart, and he was willing to stand and trade, and he did do lots of good work at a lot of the points, and I still believe he did enough to win. And I just don't believe that Takai has fought somebody at the level in which Maloney has, and I think defensive-wise there's a lot of things, in my opinion, wrong with Takai. Obviously Takai's gone and been getting stoppages as of recent, and I believe he's got a completely winning stoppage. Every fight he's won, he's gotten it as a stoppage, and so, it's impressive, but I believe that Maloney is somebody who is going to be just that bit too level of a step up, and he's going to be in front of his face, and he's going to be landing shots on Takai. And like I said, I think defensively Takai is not that sound, and so I don't think he's going to be used to taking the amount of punishment in which I believe Maloney will offer him. And he has got power, Takai, so Maloney's going to have to be careful for that. But I think Maloney's probably fought fighters with better power, and he seems to take a lot of shots in that last fight, Maloney, and still keep coming forwards. And when you look at the Inoue loss, it was quite a devastating stoppage, and so there was always questions around if that was going to affect the chin of Maloney. But like I mentioned, in that last fight, he seems to take a lot of shots and still manage to keep coming forward. So I think a unanimous decision win for Maloney, in my opinion, is fair. And then to speak about the final undercard fight, which I'm speaking about, Inoue versus Kuwahara, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, for the WBA World Flyweight title, in which I think Kuwahara will win via TKO in round 7. Obviously, this is the rematch of this fight. It was a devastating stoppage win, really, for Inoue in the first fight, but that was a while ago now. And I think defensive-wise, neither of them are too sound, and they both have been hurt in fights. And Inoue is coming off the big win versus Dalakian in his last fight, but it was another very close fight, and Inoue was hurt at points, and I'm just not too sure. Attacking wise, he's going to be an attacking threat, same as Kuwahara, but I think Kuwahara is a little bit more technically sound, and I believe with the power that he also has, I think he is going to be able to hurt Inoue and then be able to stop him. And like I mentioned, Inoue does get hurt, same as Kuwahara, but I think that's probably going to be fight of the night, in my opinion, on the undercard when I look at these fights available. Speak about this main event of a fight, Inoue versus Nery, of course. Speak about Inoue as a fighter, he's such an amazing fighter. I could be here all day listing things in which I like about him. In my opinion, he is pound for pound number 1. I know it's a bit of a bold statement, but that's just my personal opinion, and I think he's proven that just by constantly going up into weight classes and constantly dominating. And so far, at this current moment in time, I have him as pound for pound number 1, and that comes with just so much of, like I mentioned, things in which he does so well. And I'm going to list a few things, and of course no fight is perfect, so there are negatives in which I'm going to speak about, but for the most part, there's a lot of positives, and you can kind of speak about him as much of a complete package in which you can have as a boxer, and it's just amazing to watch him fight, and I'm always just making sure to watch every single one of his fights whenever I can. Inoue's, of course, amazing reactions, speed, power, precision, very explosive in his work, and is a great switch hitter in the process, and all them things together are good enough to be an amazing fighter. But he's got more. I mean, front, back foot, he can fight on both. He's learnt from adversity in his fights, which is something which I always love to see in fighters. When you speak about the Donaire fight, for him, and other fights in which he's had, not problems, but other fights in which he's had to go through certain barriers to be able to get the win, he's always seemed to learn from them, come back from them, and improve from them. And he can also go to wherever the fight needs to go and can fight whatever scenario he needs with a great team that he has around him as well, which is another benefit in which every fighter deserves to have. He's very controlled, he's got that very strong mentality, and he pretty much does break a lot of fighters mentally. He finds angles, counters very well, punches through your guard. He did that amazingly versus Topias. Topias had a very tight guard, but he was just jabbing straight shots straight through the guard, in which he's done many other occasions. He sees what's working, he sees patterns, works against them, and he seemed to do that again against Topias. He was seeing shots in which he was consistently going for Topias, and then he was just finding the patterns, going over the guard with his shots a lot of the time. And that's another thing, going over the guard, finding them angles. It's just so impressive. Great body work as well, and Nery seemingly has been hurt a little bit in past fights to the body, just as a thing to put out there. He's got that in and out type style, Inoue, and he does bait you in a lot of the time. But some of the things he was doing, at times it does look unorthodox when he's just kind of flailing his other arm about while he's jabbing you in the face. But when your concentration is at the flailing other arm, and he's just jabbing you about 3-4 times in the face, it's really interesting to see, and it's really amazing to see as well, because you just don't see many other fighters doing that and being able to do that, and it is just that distraction that does bait you in. I suppose if you're going to speak about negatives about him, he's just remaining defensively disciplined sometimes can be a bit of a thing. He comes in with confidence, he has a bit of a low guard often at times, and just remaining a little bit defensively disciplined sometimes. He can be hit with the left. He was caught a few times with the left against Topias. He always responded with the better shots afterwards, but he was catching him with a few. I do believe that he does have a good chin in his own right in a way, but he was getting caught with the left. Sometimes he can maybe have a little bit of problems against accurate, disciplined fighters with a strict type game plan. Topias seemed to have that, and was having a little bit of success into the fight with Inoue doing that. I mean, that fifth round with Inoue and Nery and Topias was just a great round, and it did show that he could get hit Inoue. Sitting down on his punches at the right time. Sometimes he's just got to make sure that he is just doing that and not sitting in range for too long. He has got an in and out type style, but sometimes he can be a little bit too confident and just sit in range a little bit too long, but most of the time he's not really doing that. In close, it's when he's in close with a physical pressure power fighter that sometimes he can have little bits of problems with, and Nery probably is that more than anything. So it would be intriguing to see how he does that, and of course he possibly could be overlooking Nery. I wouldn't really blame him for overlooking him, but you really don't want to be doing that. Nery as a fighter, he has that power to hurt Inoue, he has power to hurt anybody, and he has that will and that physical aspects, like I mentioned, where he can put that pressure on and hurt you if he wants. He's, like I mentioned, fought away from home many a times, and he's won away from home. He feints well a lot of the time. He shows no respect though in the process, and a lot of the time fighters, you can see it quite often when fighters go against other opponents who have been ranked just so highly for such a long time and are on such good momentum. You see it when people fight Canelo a lot of the time. They give him way too much respect, and that's just what mentally breaks you quite easily. But it seems like Nery doesn't really do that. He has a high output. He can put on a lot of pressure. He can be relatively consistent in his combinations at times. He seemed to be a little bit more patient early on in his last fight, but he can be consistent and can put on a lot of pressure. And when he did gain that confidence, he did then start putting on that pressure. He's a fast starter majority of the time. He's got a good chin. He has been hit, and he does get hit with his style that he does have, but he seems to have a good chin to be able to deal with that. He finds his angles very nicely as well, and at times it's not always amazingly accurate, but he does find the necessary angles a lot of the time, and he has that will, like I mentioned, that desire, which you have to be able to go up against an opponent like Inoue. Speak about negatives about him, you can quite often admire his work, and when you're against somebody like Inoue who, like I say, sometimes can get hit, but then will instantly respond, there's no way you can watch your work and admire your work against him. He can lose focus a little bit at times and then go on to headhunt, and that's just another thing where you can't be doing that in my opinion. He can be drawn into wars, possibly, you never know, could have drawn Inoue into a war, but it'd be intriguing to see if he has the time, if he can do that. He can be timed. He can become a little bit predictable in his work at times. Can use a bit of a low guard and a bit of a shoulder roll type guard, in which is something which I definitely wouldn't recommend him do. He's often there to be hit. He has, like I mentioned, been hurt to the body. He can tire, and his accuracy at times isn't always amazing. And so there are definitely elements, when I say the power, the pressure, the experience, the just consistency in his work. There's definitely things in which can hurt Inoue, and it wouldn't surprise me if he possibly does, maybe not hurt him, but does land shots on him. But Inoue is the favourite. I think that Inoue will win via TKO in round 11. I could see him getting that late stoppage. It would be a very big statement to stop him, Inoue, but he's been making statements for a long time now, and I think, like I say, he could go out there, break him down to the body, wear him down, begin to get him frustrated. Nery, I believe, is somebody who definitely can get frustrated if things aren't going his way, and then mentally break him and then be able to get that late stoppage. And then we could go on to fight, like I mentioned, to Casemiro, Akhmadaliev, two fighters who have been linked with him, and they're two entertaining fights. I think I probably would rather see the Akhmadaliev one just as a younger fighter who's coming up, but Casemiro has a lot of experience, so could be another big fight. And then possibly then moving on to fight somebody in, there was talks about Robeyson Ramirez as a first featherweight fight for Inoue, but of course he lost in his last fight. So I think Lopez could make for an interesting fight. IBF champion, of course. There's other fighters around, but in my opinion, Lopez one, if I look at it, probably would be one that I'd be the most excited to see, just because of the awkward style which Lopez has, and I just kind of want to see Inoue face every type of style possible, if I'm being completely honest. But yeah, that's it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did, indeed like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.